The story before the story.
Today, we're in Habakkuk.
Yes, you heard that right, Habakkuk. It's a small book near the very end of the Old Testament.
Habakkuk was one of Israel's prophets, people who listened to God and wrote down God's words for others.
The prophets lived and worked throughout the history of God's people.
In fact, the Old Testament contains 17 books recorded by prophets.
Many of them wrote during the final years of the kingdoms of Israel and Judah, when foreign nations threatened to attack.
Habakkuk recorded his message during this time as well.
Which is where our story starts.
Take it away.
Hey everyone, I'm Erica, and I'm excited that I get to say Habakkuk a lot today. Habakkuk. Okay, so Habakkuk has a fun name, but he lived in Jerusalem during a very difficult time. The northern kingdom of Israel had already been conquered. The southern kingdom of Judah was still free, but enemies were closing in on all sides. Everywhere Habakkuk looked, he saw things going wrong and falling apart. Even in his own country, people had forgotten God. They were fighting with each other and treating others unfairly. Habakkuk called on God.
Lord, I know how famous you are. I have great respect for you because of your mighty acts. Do them again for us. Make them known in our time.
Habakkuk cried out to God to come and fix all these terrible things. And God answered, telling Habakkuk to write it all down. In the end, God promises to bring justice. In the perfect time, everything will be made right again.
The Lord is in his holy temple. Let the whole earth be silent in front of him.
At this point, Habakkuk had a choice. He could look at what was happening around him and panic and lose hope. Or Habakkuk could look at the way God had worked in the lives of the Israelites over and over. He could trust God's promise to bring good out of hard things and right all wrongs. Habakkuk recorded his conversation with God, and at the end, he came to this conclusion.
The fig trees might not bud. The vines might not produce any grapes. The olive crop might fail. The fields might not produce any food. There might not be any sheep in the pens. There might not be any cattle in the barns. But I will still be glad because of what the Lord has done. God, my Savior, fills me with joy.
When terrible things happen, joy does not top our list of feelings. But in the middle of chaos and hardship, Habakkuk chose joy. Let's take a closer look. The fig trees might not bud. The vines might not produce any grapes. The olive crop might fail. The fields might not produce any food. There might not be any sheep in the pens. There might not be any cattle in the barns. Let's be real. If the fig trees don't do so well this year, you probably won't be affected. I mean, unless you really like fig bars. But in Habakkuk's time, the Israelites mostly made a living by farming. They either ate what they grew or what someone nearby grew. So if the crops failed, it was devastating. It meant that no one had enough to eat. The people could starve. Now, it's not a big deal for us now if olives don't have a bumper crop, but there are lots of things in our lives that can go wrong in a big way too. Maybe one of your parents loses their job. Maybe you find out someone in your family is really sick. Maybe your best friend starts hanging out with someone else instead. Maybe you won't be able to play soccer unless you get your math grade up, which feels impossible. Odds are, you can't control the bad thing that's happened, but you can control how you respond. If you focus only on what's wrong, you'll feel hopeless and overwhelmed. But you can choose to take your focus off of your problems, real though they are, and look to God. You can remember how God has helped you in the past and how God promises to make everything right in the future. This is how Habakkuk was able to say, "But I will still be glad because of what the Lord has done. God, my Savior, fills me with joy. Through Jesus, you will be able to live forever with God." That doesn't make your current troubles any less difficult. but it does mean that you can find peace and joy in the midst of them and discover that there's always a reason to celebrate. The end.